John Fredericks Radio Network. Joining us now in South Carolina already, National Campaign Manager Donald Trump for President, Corey Lewandowski. Hey, Corey, great to have you, man.
Hey, good morning, John. How are you today?
I'm fired up. I love the debate on Saturday. I got to say, I try to handicap this stuff as honestly as I can. I thought Trump's performance on Saturday was a crucible of why he's going to be the nominee, basically calling everything out. And I got to tell you the other thing. That debate, the way it was stacked with donors and the globalist Wall Street class was unbelievable. Tell our audience how that happened.
Well, so as you know, Mr. Trump is self-financing his campaign, so we don't have any donors. And so the difference is when the RNC comes around and says, hey, we're going to give these tickets in the debate hall to the major donors and the people who supported the Republican Party, and they ask for a list of names of donors. Well, we only have one donor to the campaign, so we can only submit one name, and his name is Donald Trump. He already has a spot at that stage, and is always in the center of that stage because he's the front runner. So, it's unfortunate, but this is what has happened in American politics the last 20 years. The guys who give the most money, it doesn't matter, what their positions are. They get debate tickets. Some of the local people get debate tickets, and they're the ones who are in there supporting the establishment candidates, the guys like Marco Rubio and W.Bush, who, maybe they're very fine guys, maybe they're not fine guys. It doesn't really make a difference. But what does make a difference is that none of them are going to change Washington, D.C., none of them are going to make America great again. None of them are going to do the things that Donald Trump is going to do. And so when their friends and their donors and their relatives and, the establishment political class and the lobbyists and special interests all get the tickets, they don't want to see Donald Trump in Washington. The people that want to see Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. are the people from the great state of New Hampshire who gave him a 20-point victory. The people from the state of South Carolina who are saying in the public polls, we want Donald Trump because we know he will fundamentally change a broken system. Those are the people that should be in those debates, not these special interests and dark money lobbyist guys.
Oh, I think you hit it on the head, and it was to see the reaction of that crowd. It was obvious who was in there, and I thought Mr. Trump was very effective in telling the TV audience exactly what was going on. I want to get to the big story. One of the big stories on Saturday night's debate. Corey Lewandowski, Mr. Trump basically calling out the George W.Bush policy, saying, look, this war in Iraq was a disaster. There were no WMDs. Whether or not the former president thought there were not any WMDs. He talked about that. You took the George W. Bush policies head on Saturday night in advance of the former president coming to Greenville, I think today, to campaign for his brother. Do you think that was a mistake?
I don't think it was a mistake. I think it's exactly what the American people want. They want someone who's going to stand up and fight for them. Fight to have lower taxes. Fight to have smaller government. Fight to do better trade deals. Not just because you're going to see a person a week or 2 days and back off. That's not what we do. That's not what this country needs. You need someone who's going to go out and stand up, regardless of if it is the right or wrong thing to do. It's time to put America first. And so this notion that the Iraq war was a good thing, I think, is a fundamental philosophy that people in the moderate wing of the Republican Party think is true. And I don't think the American people think that. I may be wrong, but when you spend billions, if not trillions of dollars overseas, thousands of men and women lost their lives, wounded veterans all over the place, what do we get out of it is the question. And I think what Mr. Trump is saying is, look, you know what? I understand, Jeb, your older brother who protects you is and was the president of the United States. I understand that. But you know what? Sometimes you have to call it what it is. And just because he was the president doesn't mean mistakes weren't made. And this notion that, the Iraq war was a good thing is fundamentally flawed in Mr. Trump's opinion. So calling him out ahead of time allows us to make sure we set the stage that, look, people make mistakes, and they have to be held accountable for those mistakes. That's what we're talking about.
Look, I think he absolutely did the right thing. And from my perspective, I've been saying this for some time, so you know where I stand on it. I think that Mr. Trump had the kahunas to tell it like it is. And I think when he said that, there's a lot of Republicans that have been very skeptical about these wars. They kind of went with it, and somebody has to be the adult in the room. That's the way I look at it. I want to get to Antonin Scalia, one of the greatest justices maybe in the history of the United States, the intellectual conservative cornerstone of the Supreme, without a doubt. What are the qualities and qualifications that a President Trump would seek out in his nominee?
I think first and foremost, you have to have a justice who is not going to legislate from the bench. That's number one. It's the most critical issue. And if you look at the life of Justice Scalia, he didn't legislate from the bench. He looked at what the Constitution said, and he adhered to those principles without ever wavering from it. That is the model of the person that you'd want to have replace him. You know, he has done so much, and the court is such a fragile thing where right now you've got a 4-4 split probably on every major issue, from issues of the Second Amendment to the life issues, etc. And, you know, I hate to say there's a litmus test, but the litmus test is that you read the Constitution, you understand what the framers of our country wrote, and you stick to the Constitution. That's a litmus test. And what we don't want to find is we don't want to find a justice who, quote-unquote, grows into the position, right? Someone who says, well, look, David Souter was a great example. George H.W. Bush appointed Justice Souter, who, by the way, was from New Hampshire, and John Sununu advocated for him, got in there and was probably one of the most liberal justices that a Republican has ever appointed because they didn't do the proper work in vetting him. And that was a shame, and it really turned back some of the things that the conservative movement was about. So you have to make sure that you look at the justices, that you're the potential nominees, and you look at maybe Pryor from, you know, Arkansas or Sykes from Wisconsin, justices who are sitting on the bench, who have a record of following the Constitution, not interpreting it in their own way, but following the rules and the letter of the law of the Constitution, and making sure that that is how our justices would move forward, because that's the most important thing. I think it's much bigger than any one single issue. It's about not legislating from the bench. That's the most important factor.
So are you saying now that a President Trump is going to pick a constitutional conservative justice? Is that what I understand?
That's the number one factor for us, is exactly right. Someone who, again, will not legislate from the bench. They're going to look at the Constitution. It's an originalist. They're going to say, this is what the framers meant when they wrote the father of our country, the fathers. This is what they've said. This is what I believe to be true. And as a justice on the highest court in the land, we will hold to the outline that the fathers of our country laid out in writing, because we believe what their words say are exactly what they meant.
Okay, I want to get to jobs moving to Mexico. We're with National Campaign Manager for the Donald Trump for President campaign, Corey Lewandowski. The Carrier Air Conditioner Company moving to Mexico, moving from Indianapolis, that affects just under 1,500 people who are going to lose their jobs. The manager comes out the other day and says, look, we're not making enough profits. We have to cut the cost of labor. So we're going to take our plant to Mexico, 1,500 jobs gone. People were crying. It was amazing to me that the only person on that stage on Saturday night that mentioned it was Mr. Trump. Are the other candidates just blind to what is happening here?
You know, what's amazing to me is that the difference between an elected politician, a career politician, and a business executive, and that's what you have here. You've got Donald Trump talking about the fact, and he has been talking about the fact, that our jobs are being shipped overseas every single day. Carrier is just, unfortunately, the most recent example, and he was the only person on the debate stage to even mention it. Nobody else even said a word. He's talked about plants being shipped, you know, from Tennessee and a big car plant being built down in Mexico. He's talked about Nabisco no longer being in our country and being shipped to Mexico. He's talked about how the Japanese have come over and bought the Chicago Stock Exchange. What is going on, right? Nobody else is even talking about this anymore. And it is such a tragedy, because if we actually want our people in our country to be able to work, You need a business executive who's going to make sure that when Carrier decides, hey, we're going to move to Mexico or we're going to close this plant, there are ramifications because we need to make sure our people in our country have jobs. And he's the only one talking about it, and that's the fundamental difference between a business executive who can get things done and a career politician who's all talk and no action.
Well, I think that's it. Let's get to foreign policy. According to the debate Saturday night, Mr. Trump saying, and he was taken to task on this by several of the other candidates, Mr. Trump saying with ISIS, look, we have to focus on ISIS right now. That means that let's put Assad aside because essentially he's not the issue. The issue is ISIS. He also said, let's engage the Russians. That came under criticism, but don't you think what he's saying makes sense? It's certainly what I've been saying for some time. Why are we overly focused with removing Assad and battling with Putin when basically the first thing we have to do is get rid of ISIS? And if they're willing to engage us in that battle, what's the problem?
Well, that's a great question. And again, what you have someone with Donald Trump, and I hate to keep saying it, who has a vision to predict what will happen in the future because he's done it so many times. He predicted Osama bin Laden in one of his books in the early 2000s, and that he would be a major factor. And what he's saying here is very clear. If Russia wants to go and bomb the hell out of ISIS, why would we not want that to happen? We don't even know, so many of these other elected officials say, well, if we go and do that, we're going to destabilize Syria and we're going to put somebody else in and we're going to get rid of Assad. Who is the question? The U.S. government is probably funding 4 or 5 different types of rebel groups right now. They have no clear leader. They don't know who's going to take over if Assad is removed from power. ISIS will only become stronger if he is removed from power. He is a very, very bad individual, but he's an individual who, in his country, is keeping things in check because he's such a bad guy they're afraid of him. And look, it's a very complex situation. We can take Assad to the World Court afterwards, but the number one thing that we would need to do is to eliminate ISIS overseas so they don't come here and commit terrorist attacks on our soil. The only way to do that is to go right to where they are and bomb the hell out of ISIS. And if Russia's willing to do that on our behalf so that they aren't inundated with ISIS, I would say that's a good thing for us to have.
I would also. I think that makes total sense, and I've been saying that for some time. On Saturday night, Mr. Trump, in very stark terms, called Ted Cruz a liar. He also said that he was not a very nice individual. Do you think that was a good thing, or do you think it was over the top?
Well, here's what I think. I think what you get now is you get into the season of politics where you get candidates who are going to say and do anything they can because their campaigns are failing. What we saw in the state of New Hampshire was Mr. Trump ran a very positive campaign in the last 10 days of that election, and the people of New Hampshire rewarded him for that. In South Carolina, we're continuing to run a positive campaign talking about messages that Mr. Trump has brought to the table, specifically illegal immigration. And what you find is these other candidates who are running, they have to say anything and do anything. They're very desperate. And so, look, Ted Cruz, who wants to go out and make false accusations, look, here's a guy who probably did something which at minimum is disingenuous to Ben Carson, telling everyone that he was getting out of the race in Iowa, which it wasn't true. And then he kind of pushed back and said, well, it was my staff's fault, but no one's held accountable. He's doing the exact same thing in South Carolina. His team is running robocalls saying that Donald Trump is not going to be in the race in South Carolina. I think what you have is you've got politicians who are willing to say anything and do anything to get elected because they're all talk, no action. And at the end of the day, if the American people decide to elect those people, we will not only be in the bad position we're in today, but it'll be worse. These are the same people who've given us $19 trillion in debt. And the bottom line is they're sitting in Washington, D.C. right now, and our country isn't getting better. And that's why we need fundamental change.
Okay, you've got between now and Saturday basically 5 days of campaigning in South Carolina. Can you give our audience a little bit of a sense of what your schedule is, and also tell us about the town hall meeting on CNN? How does that work?
Yeah, let me start in reverse order. CNN on Thursday night is going to have a town hall meeting moderated by Anderson Cooper. It's going to have about 800 people in the audience. It's just going to be a sit-down conversation. and all of the candidates are participating in it. And Mr. Trump is going to speak around 10 p.m. on Thursday. It's a 2-day event. And so, again, it's going to be one of the last opportunities to have people ask, or Anderson ask questions directly from the audience to the candidates. But for us, you know what? It sounds insane, but an 800-person crowd for Mr. Trump is a small crowd. All the other candidates would take this any time. But when we go to events, and we're traveling to, I think, 16 or 17 cities in South Carolina over the next 6 days, our crowds are in the thousands. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing to see, right? It's capacity crowds everywhere we go. We've got an event in Greenville tonight, and we've got 9,000 people confirmed to come to. It's remarkable, because the message of making America great again, of fixing a broken system, of reducing our debt, making better trade deals, resonates across the board. It's not just Republicans. It's not just Democrats. It's everybody. And in the state of South Carolina, they don't have party registration, which means anybody can show up and vote on Election Day, whether you're a Republican or a self-described Democrat or a moderate or independent, doesn't matter. Right. You can go and pull a ballot for anybody you want. So, our goal over the next 5.5, 6 days here in South Carolina is to see as many people as humanly possible, to lay out the vision that Donald Trump has to make America great again, to talk about the trade deals that are disastrous that we can fix, to fix the economy, right? To kill ISIS, to stop them and fight them overseas, to make sure our borders are safe, to stop illegal immigration, to build a wall. These are all simple premises that the American people understand, and it resonates with them. That's what we want to go and do, is talk about what we want to do. If Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush want to spend, their money, which is not really their money, it's the donors' money, the Washington special interest money, to attack Donald Trump, they can do that. I don't think that's what the American people want to see.
Well, we'll see what happens Saturday evening. Are you going to predict a win?
No, I'm not going to predict anything. I'm going to predict we're going to work as hard as we possibly can. It would be a great honor, of course, to have the privilege of winning in South Carolina, but it's a long way to go, and a week in politics is a lifetime. So our goal is to just put our head down, work as hard as we can, shake as many hands as we can, see as many people as possible, and make sure that people understand that if you fundamentally want to change the system, the only way to do that is to bring someone in who's not beholden to the special interests and the K Street crowd and the donor class. And the only one who can do that is Donald Trump.
All right, that's going to be the final word. We want to thank Corey Lewandowski for being with us again today, National Campaign Manager Donald J. Trump for President. More information, go to donaldjtrump.com. Always great to have you, man. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.
And I'll see you hopefully in South Carolina. We're going to be live at famous Tommy's Country Ham and House Diner